Alex Benson,
And I'm still Jared Weiss.
and we are Ethereal Sunrise, back yet again for another discussion about one of the songs from our album. I think this time we'll be talking about the eighth song and the second to last on the album called Funk. And this was one of Jared's compositions and was the last of his individual songs that he had written. And so, Jared, you want to sort of talk a little bit about where this song comes from?
Sure. So not only is the last of mine to appear on the album, it's the last of mine I wrote for the album, and indeed, I think the last written for the album, period. So I was like, okay, let's just go ahead, do a very straightforward rock and roll song. And one of these ideas popped into my head of just this really big, dumb rock and roll riff, the walk up that precedes each of the verses, na 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 na, that pattern. And I was like, all right, this sounds fun. We can try this. And that led to the stringing together of about, I don't know, 6 different rock and roll cliches, while hopefully not sounding exactly like any one to the point of being a lawsuit. So it was kind of this. It's an A minor, which Alex, do we have anything else in A minor on this album? I don't think
I
we
don't think so.
do, which is kind of astonishing because it's such a common key, and I think it's such a quintessential big dumb rock song key. So I think that was part of what caused me to gravitate towards it. The arrangement was also fairly straightforward initially. One of the big things that came up, again, was, I think, your idea, Alex. You really wanted that walk up riff on the bass to be like bass chords. So we had this really heavy low end, particularly in that section, and we were trying to figure out what to do with it. It sounded a little too heavy in that direction, and you suggested the slide guitar, possibly augmenting on the high notes. So I think that did end up giving it a bit of a unique character and flavor that breaks away from that classic big dumb rock song mold a little. And there are just accents of that slide guitar in the first half of the song, and that's how I wrote, a pretty straightforward 2-minute rock and roll song, and that's it. That's the end of this video. Except that this is still our weird, hard prog rock album, and I didn't want to totally lose sight of that. I got it in my head, I don't know why, that I wanted it to go to F sharp minor, which is another key I don't think we utilized elsewhere on the album. I think I was just fiddling around on the bass. Actually, I think it was the guitar at this point when I came up with the bass part in the recurring bass part in 7. And separately, I came up with the the guitar line, that that whole thing that escalates in the second part of the song. They were kind of 2 separate ideas, and I wasn't really sure which one I wanted to use, so I was like, screw it, I'll do both. And originally I had envisioned the song ultimately returning to the A minor part. I didn't really know precisely how I was going to transition back, but I was pretty sure I one way or another I would. But as that build up kind of occurred, and I was thinking of Can't You Hear Me Knocking by the Rolling Stones, which is one of my favorite songs, period. And the jam that comes out of the initial 2-minute song structure is one of my favorites, and it never comes back. I loved I love the song for many reasons, but one is just the confidence in the jam to know that it can stand on its own without needing to come back to the main hook of the song. So it's like, we're just going to stay in the F sharp. and leave it there. So that's kind of how the arrangement came together. Um, Now, from a a instrumentation standpoint, Alex, you were on the bass.
Hmm.
Uh, and then one of the other things that uh, was kind of unique to the song was this was the only song where you and I did kind of a trading lead. You on flute, me on lead guitar. Song is also a little unique in that I think it's the only one where I do all of the guitars. Do you do any guitars on
That's
this one,
correct.
Alex?
That's
Yeah,
that's the only song I don't play any guitar on.
right. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Um, um, but I knew because this time I think most of the other songs were not only written but at least fairly completely arranged, if not necessarily completely recorded.
Mhm.
Um, and we really didn't have any songs where you and I were trading lead in any kind of meaningful way. We should do something like that. So we I believe we recorded it live more or less. And we knew it was going to be like this 30 seconds, four times through this walk down pattern. What do you remember about that, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, we were playing it together and recording it together, which was a fun process on our little home equipment.
Yeah,
um, yeah, and it was just we were trading licks, and after playing it a bunch of times, we found some licks that we liked and just sort of developed it from that jam. Um, and I remember as well, your original thought had been that it would actually be me dueling with me, um, of me
that
on the
sounds.
flute and me on the guitar.
Yeah,
But this would have been another song where I was really trying to push you a little bit in terms of the lead guitar stuff, hence the yeah, add a lot more lead guitar to the first half of the song with the slides. And you had done this really cool guitar solo in that first half. And I remember the first time you had presented it to me, the way it
yeah,
had been sort of arranged, it just didn't have that sort of rock and roll power. And I was like, what are you doing? It's like you have
yeah,
this cool lead guitar solo and a cool rock and roll song, like present it like a rock and roll, you know,
yeah,
arena busting solo. And then sort of when that got sort of rearranged and was sort of represented that way, I thought it really sort of brought that power about. And I wanted, you to have some space as well to continue that in the second half of the song and just sort of have you take on all of the guitar work, because I think it again adds some color to this song that makes it distinct from the other songs.
right.
And despite it sort of being the big dumb rock song, it still manages to have a lot more sophistication than 99.9% of dumb rock songs. So
Right, right. I mean, I guess when you tag on a weird 7/4 jam to it, you
yeah,
get into some more unique territory. I'd
yeah.
forgotten about that part. Although I do remember right because the solo it was the same solo, but I think as I originally arranged it, I didn't have a clear vision in mind for what I wanted the tone of the guitar to be like, and I
Mhm,
think I first came up with some like it also may have been a kind of spacier tone, kind of like the end, but it had a delay effect. I remember very
mhm,
distinctly it had this delay effect that I liked, and it sounded cool. And I still think it sounds cool. But you were right that it didn't really fit with the tone of the rest of the song.
mhm.
Um, and then at your prompting, I retooled it to have more of a like arena rock vibe. That may have even been the name of the preset in the software that we used. I'm not sure, something along those lines. Um, that really fit the mold of what we were doing in that first section a lot better. It was the same exact solo. I didn't re-record it or anything. It was just changing a lot about the way it sounded. Pretty striking actually how different the same exact solo can sound depending on how you cultivate the tone. Um, the other thing I really like about the endings solos is so we were recording this one if memory or we were at least recording the solos for this one is if memory serves within 48 hours of us moving out of the apartment we were sharing at the time. So we didn't
Yeah.
have a lot of time to like develop it. And as I recall, we pretty much came up with and put it down. I don't recall it taking much more than a half hour, maybe 45 minutes for us to, we
Nope.
kind of just.
It was fast. It was loose.
Right, right, exactly. And I think that energy really translates well. Um, in the final time through the chord pattern, as I'm doing these, I'm kind of hitting notes across, the one and the five again across the E string and the B string, working my way up before doing a number of whole tone bends. Um, and we kind of had a sense just from the preceding time playing through it a bunch, what my timing was going to be for that. And I completely botched the timing. And you can hear me like trying to catch up real quick. Except that it ended up adding this like additional syncopated vibe, like
Mhm.
vibe to it that actually fit very nicely. Um, so the kind of this just this looseness ended up really translating into what you hear um, in a way that really works.
Mhm.
I think that was cool. Um, the other thing about this one was in terms of how we arranged it was the vocals. So this was one, and maybe worth discussing the lyrics while I'm at it. Um,
And why on earth you named the song Funk just to confuse everybody?
yeah, I did find that somewhat amusing. I also didn't have a better title in mind. You know, I couldn't see myself writing one of these, yeah, rock and roll, go rock and roll, type songs. So it still has a little bit of a, you know, when things are bad, then there is rock and roll,
Mhm.
which I think maintains the spirit of yeah, rock and roll, go rock and roll without just being self-congratulatory or all of that. It's thematically kind of consistent, I guess, with Madam Sing as sort of a love letter to the power of music, um, but with an clearly knowingly dumb energy. And I particularly liked sticking you, Alex, with some of the sillier brasher lines in the chorus. I guess kind of like with Not Done Yet, you get kind of these contrasting attitudes, the more um I don't know, fearful is the right word, but I'm kind of the voice of
Morose.
yeah, and the voice of concern, and you're the voice of we're gonna get past that
Mhm.
with a guitar. Uh, and all the while, I get to make you sing lines about not being a punk, among other things. Uh,
So how
so
did the song about being true to the spirit of rock and roll wind up being called funk?
yeah. Oh, you've noticed that I've dodged the question. Um, I mean, obviously, it is in the song, so
Mhm.
no one can claim that it's not related to the song. Um, hand me my guitar and I'll get out of my funk. Um, you know, I mean, that's the ethos right there. That's the take home message. And I thought, out of my funk, get out of my funk. Um, get out of my funk almost is evocative of like give up the funk. It's like that almost I think would have been more of a sin to go with a title like that and not have it be funkier. Um, so I was like, and and I thought funk on its own captured both sides of the coin. The verse, I'm in the funk. The chorus, I'm getting out of the funk. But funk kind of at least applies to both. And I think that was part of the idea of the B section. The 7/4 bass pattern was at least supposed to be a little bit funkier relative to the very straight ahead rhythm of the A section. Uh, so it is certainly not a classically funk song, uh, but I defend the choice of title as apt. So there.
The emotional funk rather than the genre funk.
Yes, I mean that's certainly right. It does draw from the lyrics first and foremost. All right. Well, as always, thank you for watching. If you haven't checked out the song, it'll be linked at the end of the video. Check out the whole album as well. You can find us on social media pages. You can buy or download the music on any major music streaming or download platform. We hope that these videos are even more fun for you to watch than they are for us to make. And we will have one more for you coming up soon. So keep an eye out for it. In the meantime, I'm Jared Weiss.
And I'm Alex Benson.
And take care, everyone.
Get your get out of my